Some time ago I made a quick and dirty table saw sled for making scarf joints. It served its purpose, but it was way overdue for an upgrade. At the heart of this project is some cheap T-track that I found on Amazon from Orange Aluminum. Everything else, wood and hardware, I scavenged from around the shop. When I figure out what I like and dislike about version 2 of this sled, I'll be able to strip off all the hardware and use it again. Hi, I'm Paul and this is openwoodshop.com. This T-track is 1/2 inch deep and the scrap of plywood that I'm using is only 3/4 of an inch thick, so there's not a lot of bite left for the screws. I used number 8 by 1/2 inch screws and then ground them off on the backside. It's not pretty, but this is not a beauty contest. Cutoffs can kick back, so for safety I'm putting plain type handles on away from the blade side of the sled. I have one hold down clamp from Rockler, but I want 2 more. With a simple bending jig, hot water, and thin slices of oak, I just saved $13 each. Next comes the fence. I sandwiched 2-inch wide pieces of 3/8 inch plywood between 1/8 inch pieces of plywood, leaving a 5/16 inch gap for the bolts. I think now that instead of 2-inch, perhaps 3/4 inch wide pieces would be better. I can, however, drill new bolt holes where and if needed. After gluing, one side needs to be squared, so I'm already able to use the sled. After squaring up this side, I can use the regular table saw fence to square up the other side. With the sled and basic accessories done, I suddenly find that there's nothing left to do but play around with it. Even though the holes in the fence might not be in exactly the right place, I can still use hold-down clamps to secure it, and they can be used on either side of the fence. This might be necessary for different types of scarves and other cuts. For my first test, I take a 2x2 and clamp it to the outside of the fence. There's room for one clamp on the outside, but the fence is a little too high for the second clamp to reach over, so putting a piece of scrap on top of the 2x2 fixes that problem. A third clamp firms up the fence, keeping it straight. The table saw blade flips the offcuts back, but the sled handles keep me out of harm's way. It's a nice cut, and the squareness at the ends show that my fence is perpendicular to the sled. To cut the next scarf, I'm also going to use the toggle clamps that I took from the old sled. I mounted them on a plywood base so that they could be taken on and off, but in the case of a wider stock, they might be too long and not able to fit onto the sled. For this cut, I had to make a spacer to get the knob over the height of the fence. It's at this point that I realize that over time, I'm going to eventually wind up with a lot of parts and accessories. The toggle clamps can rotate so that they are perpendicular to wherever the fence is for better holding. This piece of plywood is a little bendy, so they help straighten it out, and along with regular spring clamps positioned out of harm's way, hold the stock in place so that I can zero in on a nice straight cut. For some real-world projects, I had some small parts that I wanted to cut. Clamps and a piece of plywood hold the thin plate down securely. The plate was not very flat, so this method helped flatten it down onto the sled. As sometimes happens, a small piece of spruce warped after it was cut. So besides scarves, this sled can give me a straight edge to work from, something that my old scarf joint sled couldn't do. To keep the offcuts from falling into the blade, I came up with the idea of putting threaded inserts into the sled and then attaching a wing. This also gives a zero clearance for the blade. I didn't even try to make the back of the board perpendicular to the blade for making square cuts. I figured that the act of removing and attaching the wing would make the whole idea futile. Plus, there are so many things mounted to the sled that I would be very limited as to what I could cut. And anyway, I already have a sled for that. And finally, to give the toggle clamps more room, I made another base plate that allows me to screw it down from 3 different places, effectively moving it back away from the fence further. I was afraid that by having it screw down on the side it might cause the whole apparatus to turn, but it was very secure and the functionality was greatly increased. This great jig was so quick and easy to do, it makes me wonder, why didn't I do this before? I know that this is not the first time that such a sled has been done, so any ideas are welcome in the comments section. I don't make money at this, so your comments, likes, and subscriptions are what keeps me going. Also, feel free to check out my websites. I work on them as I can, and sometimes there is more information and projects there. And thanks.